That's cool. Okay, I think we can start, and then whoever hops on, we can kind of, update them as we go. But before we start, I just want to mention that we worked on an ARE like panel study resource PDF, and it's posted in the chat. So if you want to download it and share it with whoever you know that is going through the ARES, that would be super helpful. So again, I hope everybody's doing okay. I'm so happy to see so many people here. Usually we don't have this many attendees, so I'm actually excited. My name is Shadia Jaramillo. I'm one of the associate directors at large here in the state. And I'm actually part of the Florida Northwest chapter, and I'm currently working at Goodwin Mills Kaywood as a project designer. Brianna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so everybody, I'm Brianna Johnson. I'm also an associate director at the state level. I am a member of the Orlando chapter, and I am an employee with Baker Barrios in Orlando. And my hats go off today to Shadia, Yoselem, Nikki, and Hannah, who will be presenting, because these ladies are in the midst of testing. I only currently have 2 down, but all of these ladies are like 3 or more, so they have some really nice advice for you today.
Awesome. Let's see. So when we were actually, since this is a small group, I'll just give you all kind of like a background of why we're doing this today. When we were talking about this, we all kind of came to the conclusion that it would have been helpful for us to kind of get like do's and don'ts or lessons learned from other people that were going through the process when we were jumping in, to the ARES, because you hear like terrible stories, but you also hear people that pass tests like back to back in less than 6 months, so getting an overview of like what your experience could be or what you should expect might be helpful, especially when you're like jumping head on. So 3 takeaways for today will be help each other, share our knowledge. And a second one would be kind of like failures and successes from all 3 panelists. And the third one is just get inspired. Everybody has a success story at the very end, because the goal is getting a license. So that's why we're here, and that's what we're going to achieve. So without further ado, let's start with Yoselem. All of them are going to introduce themselves and kind of give you a brief, description about their journey and where they're at. And then at the very end, we'll take some questions. And then it's open for all of you guys to share your path, journey, and again, ask questions. So Yoselem, please.
Hey, my name is Yoselem Bravo. I am a project coordinator in Tampa Bay for Gresham Smith. I work in healthcare architecture. Very fun. In the journey with the ARE, I started my journey officially in 2021. I took one test, PCM in 2020. However, I didn't know, I just tried it out. So it was like my first time, but then after that, I took it very serious. So in 2021, I started, and then the pandemic happened, of course, and everything. But I have passed 3 exams. My last one is with PSI, so I can talk a little bit about PSI. And so PCM, PJM, and CE are the ones that I have passed. And like I said, I belong to the AIA Tampa Bay chapter.
Hannah.
Hi. So my name is Hannah Hubble, and I'm an associate director for the Northwest Florida chapter. I currently live in New Orleans. A month ago, I lived in Pensacola and worked at Dalrymple Salas Architecture, but I've since moved to New Orleans, and I will actually start a job next week at a place called Nano Architecture. I am currently in the middle of testing. I've passed 4, and my journey kind of started, I guess, I only waited about 6 months after graduating from school in 2019. And the first exam I took, I failed, which was like pretty discouraging, but I waited the 2 months, tested again and passed it. And then a month later, COVID hit in March of 2020. So that kind of put like a 6-month, 7-month pause on testing. And then as soon as it kind of lifted, I resumed again. And now I just have the 2 big ones left: project planning and design and project development documentation. So that's where I'm at.
Nikki.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Pareda. I'm with the Lens Group, which is located in Lakeland. I'm also an associate director for AIA Tampa Bay, and currently a project manager. I was doing Legoland projects for about 3 years in themed entertainment, but currently and have been doing multifamily for the past couple of years, and I love it very much. But my ARA journey started back in 2016, which was about a year before we transitioned into 5.0. So I've been doing this for a really long time. And if it weren't for COVID and the extension of the time clock, I would have ran up my time this year. So I'm actually really grateful in a way for that. But I feel like my journey's just been really, really just up and down, because I was able to pass my first 3 exams really quickly. And I actually, thank God, just passed my 4th exam last weekend at PSI. So I'm really happy about that one. I've got 2 more left. But I have taken every single test. I have failed every single test. I have failed PA 5 times in a row. It was really, really struggling for me. And I feel like I'm definitely one of those stories that don't give up. And for me, I needed to take about a year off from studying after my 5th fail in a row, just to kind of get my mental health back straight. And it's helped me so much. I felt kind of defeated actually having to take a break. But during that time, I was working a lot. And I realized that because we're in this profession and we work so much, in a way, we're actually studying as we work, because we're getting the in-field experience. And I didn't realize that until after. And I was able to move. I did things, during that time off, and finally tackled it again a few months ago. And when I sat down and took PA for the 6th time, it felt so easy. It was just like a breeze. So anybody who ever feels super defeated and just doesn't feel well about a certain exam and they keep tackling the same one, give yourself some time, take a break if you can. And I was also worried about that because my rolling clock is running out. So I'm like, I don't have the ability to take a break, but now that I have 2 left, I have about a year and a half left. And I'm really excited to tackle that. So yeah, that's more or less my journey.
That's awesome. Let me ask you a question. How did you come to the conclusion that you needed the break? What did you feel? Did you talk to other people? How was that?
So people gave me the advice of taking a break, and I didn't want to take it because I'm really stubborn. And I was so close to passing PA so many times that I kept saying, well, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. But it wasn't until the last fail, I was like, you know what? It was kind of like a last straw. Mm-hmm. And I really felt it, your mind and your body really tells you, just take a break. And I wanted to move on with my life and do other things. And again, I felt defeated, but at the end of the day, it was one of the best decisions I could have made for myself for testing. I also, during that break and right when I was studying again, I tried new testing materials, stuff that I've never tried before. One of them was AmberBook. And I know it's really expensive. And I know a lot of people are kind of hesitant to get it because of its price. But I was able to talk to my CEO at the Lens Group, and we worked it out because we're a firm that's 50 and under. It's only $2,000 a year for the entire office to get AmberBooks. So it was a really good deal and ended up working out really nicely because we have a lot of us that are studying for the exam. So that for sure has been a really pivotal point for me to do something else fresh and new. So yeah, I would say those 2 things helped.
Awesome. Actually, I forgot that we had to issue a poll. So now it's kind of late.
Oh, yeah.
But whoever, since we have, Crystal, do you want to release the poll, or I can just ask the question since we don't have
I can release the poll. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that
Okay.
before we go into discussion.
Okay. Just so you guys can get an idea.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, the poll's been launched.
Oh, that was
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to edit. Sorry. Oh my gosh, I like stopped it on. Oh, let me relaunch it. Sorry.
I was like, wait, I didn't.
I'm sorry. I meant to give you guys, I was gonna say, I'm gonna give you 30 seconds. Just kidding. 5. Okay.
okay. Would you let us know, Krista, or does it show up? I never
When I
use
end
Zoom.
the poll, I think I can share the results. So,
Okay, cool.
okay, give you guys a couple more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end it and then share results. Can you guys see the results?
Mhm.
Yes.
So
Okay.
it seems like around 27% has tested PSI. Most of us are on the 0 to 1. So the very beginning, maybe then. Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
That'll be helpful for Hannah, Jocelyn, and Nikki kind of to like target, the discussion. We can still talk about the bigger tests though, because I feel like talking about all of them will be helpful.
So, Shadia, not to interrupt, but one thing I noticed is that about half and half are saying they're testing for the first 3 and then the last 3 of the tests. But for those of us who are 0 to 1 tests in, can we talk about like the order?
Yeah.
Because some people test in order, some don't, but maybe the panel can discuss like how they grouped their tests.
Yeah. Who wants to take it?
You can take it. So I started with PCM. However, I'm going to say this, and this is my personal opinion, and everybody is different. For me, PJM was very, very hard. Very hard for me. Like it was the hardest test for sure. And I will say that because even though I'm very good at math, I didn't. So English is my second language. And I didn't understand the concept of the terminology for the formulas. And if you don't understand the terminology for the formulas, you can be so good at math, but you're going to get very confused because the questions sometimes are very tricky. So I think if you want to be strategic in the way that you're testing, I would just recommend to do like an overall of every test. Like, NCARB has like the summary of every test and see what are your capabilities, what are you really great at, and what you're not. I have friends that they're so good at construction because that have what they have done most of the time. So when they take CE, it's so easy for them. So I will say, like, I know everybody has their own opinion of how should you start, but I feel like if I would have left PJM by the end, maybe my journey wouldn't be so long. So in my own personal lessons learned, it all depends of the strategy that how you tackle the exams, your knowledge about the content, your knowledge with your experience. And that doesn't mean that necessarily what you know is what it's on the exams, but it will help you for sure. It will be like a background thing. So I will take it as that, just like with the thing that you feel the most comfortable with, you can start with that and then just leave the other things that they're more difficult for you by the end.
Does Hannah or Nikki have another opinion?
I can go next. I think for when I first started, I started so soon after like graduating from school that I decided to start with the PCM, the PJM, the CE first, because I had had a couple of other people who graduated like several years before me and had already started taking them. They were like, you should save the PA and the 2 big ones to the end because having experience helps with those. And again, I haven't taken the 2 big ones yet, so I'm not sure. I don't know if the experience will help me with those yet, but I was happy that I grouped I definitely studied for multiple exams at a time in the beginning, and I think that helped a lot, like grouping PCM, PJM, and CE together, just because there's a lot of overlap specifically with contracts on PCM and PJM, and so taking them back to back, I think helped me because all of that knowledge was like really fresh. And then also I found when I took CE, that was kind of the first one that I took that experience. At the point I had taken it, had been working for a year and a half, and I found that experience did play a role in me passing that exam. It's different for everybody because everybody works at different firms, and some people specialize in like residential or commercial. And I think how long you've been working before you test plays a big role too, and the ones you take first and how well you do. So I guess the biggest advice that I have is like try to group similar ones together, and the ones that you group together, try not to wait too long in between testing. That way the knowledge is fresh and you can kind of like skip to the next one more smoothly.
So I would say, I took the first 3 exams in the 4.0 version. So like, I don't want to give any advice in 5.0 because I'm not as used to that. I've only taken the more technical exams in 5.0, but I will say, so I learned really well audibly. So like if I can listen to something like a podcast or listen to a video, like that's the best way I can learn. And Schiff Hardin helped me so much with those exams. And I had to listen to him like 3 times all the way through to really get it. But what's really helped is, and also just visually, I printed out all the contracts and I binded them in a book, and it was kind of thick, and that took time. But I'm so glad I did, because I went through each contract and listened while he talked about every single section, and I would mark it up, highlight, the crap out of it, and just put so many notes. And that became like such a helpful guide. I assume it would be a helpful guide for all 3 exams. You guys could let me know, but it really helped me, passing my, those pro practice exams. So I would definitely suggest him, and his lecture. The link to that is on the PDF that Shadi shared in the chat.
Yeah, I agree with the Schiff Harding lectures and kind of like printing the contracts, because technically that is the base for at least the first 3 tests. And you will always get some kind of contract related questions in all tests. They're kind of like sprinkled in there. So that's great feedback. Let's see. What other things do you guys think that when it comes to how you should schedule the test plays a big role in, besides experience? Do you think that, I don't know, Nikki, do you want to say something?
I was going to say, for anyone taking like the last 2, I personally, and this could be an unpopular opinion, but I personally think you should schedule both the last 2 exams, PDD and PPD, like one day after another. And the strategy that I have done, which I have not passed, so maybe it's not a good strategy, but I'm going to do it again because I think it works for me, is you take like PPD, take it. It's a 5-hour test. When you're done, do not look at your provisional, whether you passed or not. Just don't look at it. Stay at a hotel if you can nearby, if you don't live next to a testing center. Take the next one, PDD, the very next day. Take it for 5 hours. Then look at your provisional, see if you passed or not. Then go to your car, open up your phone, and see if you passed the first one. Because I have other people that have tried the strategy, but they looked at the first test and they saw that they failed and they feel discouraged. So I would not even look at whether you passed or failed. Just assume you passed. And take the next one. They're so similar.
Back to back. Yeah.
Mhm.
If you're taking them back to back, then don't do that. I will say, now that you're talking about PPD and PDD, I would group PA and PPD together.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good mix too.
Just because of, see, Samantha.
Yeah.
Those tests are the content overlaps so much. I know that there's, to me, personal opinion, and I'm not a panelist, I'm sorry, guys. There's a misconception about the 2 bigger tests, because everybody's like, yeah, the 2 bigger tests, take them together. But I truly feel like PA and PPD should be should be together based on the content, because PDD is mostly like construction documents side. So anyway, back
Yeah.
to you.
No, that's great to say, because one thing that also helped me taking a pause from PA is taking PD, because and I was nervous to take that, but I was like, wait, I think this is easier than PA. And they're so similar, just like you said. So I think that's also a really, really good strategy. I don't really hear a lot of people talk about that strategy, but I think that's good strategy.
Mhm.
I guess the only thing I have to say is, I know for me personally, I experience burnout pretty easily. And so I would guess if anybody is on the call that like experiences burnout, before you start testing, I think for me, I went in knowing that I would take the first 3 back to back, take a break, and then start with the last 3. Unfortunately, I had like a 6-month break in between passing my first one and second one because of COVID. But like once I passed PCM and then I had 6 months of COVID before testing center opened up, I like started plowing forward to take PJM and CE. And then once I was halfway through, I was like, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go like 4 or 5 months without studying before I pick back up again and just kind of relax. And it worked out too, because it was like right around the holidays. So I just kind of got to chill, enjoy the holidays, then pick back up in the spring. And so that was kind of like my approach to like breaking up all 6 together, just kind of dividing them in half. But I feel like that helped me a lot because I was able to just like rest, recharge, then like kind of circle back around.
Okay. If you could think of one advice that you would have liked to receive before starting the journey, what would that be?
Don't give up on life. Do your
That's a
life,
good one.
you know.
That's a good one.
I agree with that. I was going to ask Nikki and I believe Hannah, you both mentioned just taking a test, or maybe it was Jocelyn, and just taking the test to kind of understand what it is. But like Samantha just mentioned, I always found that I actually passed the test once I sort of relaxed more and just went in there knowing that I have a certain knowledge and, you know, whatever I knew at that moment was going to be it. I couldn't cram for this. So can you guys talk about like how you said, well, just take the test, understand how to take the test, and then go from there?
I know, kind of speaking on what you just said, like going in with like the knowledge that you have is what you have. I try not to study the night before an exam. Or if I do study, I cut myself off. Like I'm going to study up till dinner and then I'm going to eat dinner and I'm not going to study afterwards. I'm not going to think about it. Like I'm going to watch my favorite TV show or whatever and go to sleep. And I have found that like really, really helps my nerves a lot. And it allows me to sleep because if I study it, like the biggest mistake I made with the very first exam I took which is the one I failed, was I was studying the night before up to like 11 or midnight. And that was a mistake because then I couldn't go to sleep. I was just thinking about it. And then I had to wake up at 6 a.m. and drive an hour and a half to testing center. And it was just not a good combination.
Mm-hmm.
So the test itself is not rote memory per se.
Yes.
It's more an application of your knowledge, correct?
Mhm.
So the cramming doesn't really serve you any purpose past a certain point.
Yeah.
I will say this, what helped me a lot was to talk about the knowledge that I have with other friends. So I will do like meetups with my friends and we will talk about the exams and we will talk about what we know and we will discuss and kind of like debate. And it was like, no, it's about this. And I'm like, no, it's about that. And you find the answer together because my memory retains more that than a book. So I don't know why, but that's how I study the most. Like when I study with people, it helped me a lot. And I have friends that I have studied that they're not taking CE anymore, but I needed a lot of help in CE. And like they have said like, okay, let's just discuss about it. So I'll have questions about certain things and we will just discuss about it. And that's how I passed my last test. I feel like I failed it like 3 times, and I was like, okay, so whatever I'm doing is not working. Whatever, like just studying and like reading about it and reading the contracts. I'm very good at contracts. So like I already knew all this information. So I'm like, why am I failing about it? And I'm like, I just need to talk with someone, and I just need to review everything that I know. And then when I went to take the exam, that was it. That's what I needed it. So it's just the type of, sometimes it's about that. It's not about how much do you know, how much do you read. It's like the different possibilities that can happen in the scenarios that the exam gives you. So that's why discussion is so important, at least for me.
I would say for me, the one thing I wish I knew before going into testing is we have a tendency, or I have a tendency to like let the firm know that you're taking a test, because you have to take the day off and people are wondering where you are, especially if it's on a Monday or Tuesday. And I noticed that would give me a lot of anxiety, because everyone's rooting for you, but then there's that pressure. And then if you fail, it's like, oh, you'll get it next time. Like people are so supportive, but it's also like you feel like you let others down, and it just puts a lot of pressure. So the one I just passed, I didn't tell anyone except 2 people. And I was like, just, pray for me. Hopefully it goes well. And it went well. And I think I went into there a lot more chill. I went in there thinking, if I fail, I fail. I'll do my best. And it was a pass. And it was just like no anxiety. I just would really recommend, if you can, just don't tell the office. Just keep it to yourself. It's you and the exam. And if you pass, then great. Then you can celebrate after.
I 1000% agree with you.
That's exactly what I did.
I feel like
also-
we'll learn from that. Yeah. Okay. What else? Should we just open it? I mean, this is kind of like a discussion. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask, even if it's specific to you.
So I have a question. It sounds like a lot of people on the panel, or not a lot, but some of the people on the panel have tested with PSI now. And so just to give people context, I am 3 in to my testing. So I'm actually taking PPD on Tuesday with PSI, and I haven't tested with them yet. So I've only done Prometric. Most of them have been in person. I did one at-home test with Prometric. That was a disaster. So I probably will never do an at-home test again. But I wanted to get the panel's opinion on PSI and any pros and cons or any suggestions they have compared to testing at Prometric.
Samantha, where are you taking your testing center?
So I believe it's over near Celebration. I believe it's like the only one in the Orlando area, apparently.
Okay. So I went to the Sarasota one.
Okay.
And I personally had a really great experience with PSI there. I thought it was a really nice location, and I didn't really have any issues, except there's a couple things I do want to suggest as like some potentials, things that you might come across. I noticed that because NCARB is new to PSI, that the proctors at PSI are not trained enough to know what our exam entails, when our breaks are, and how long our breaks are. So when I went, and I went 2 weeks ago and this happened, it's different because when I went, there was like a bunch of people in line already. And instead of like going up, checking in, and then going straight to your test, everybody had to go up, check in at the same time, then sit back down and wait for everybody to get checked in. Once everybody was checked in, the proctor would come to us and say, here are the rules. You must not talk. You must not repeat what you see, all this stuff. And then we all go in at once, which is different. But the biggest thing that I want to like display as just like a rule of thumb is when you go to PSI in your testing center, make sure that when you're in line checking in, you have them confirm right then and there that you are allowed a 30-minute break and you are allowed to go into your locker, because she did not say that. And she actually took about 5 minutes to check that. And when she was checking it, she's like, oh yeah, you're allowed a 5-minute break. I'm like, no, I'm allowed a 30-minute break. Can you please confirm? And so she took a little bit more time and confirmed it. And she said, I don't know if you're allowed to go in your locker. I said, please confirm. Because if we had gone through that whole exercise during your break, that really wastes your break. So even if you're holding up people from checking in, make sure they get it right, because that's the only way that they're going to know next time someone takes an NCARB exam that they're allowed a break. For me personally, I need the break to recharge for case studies. Some people just test all the way through, but that would be my biggest advice.
No, that's great to know, because I rely heavily on my breaks too. So that's really good to know. Thank you, Nikki.
Sure, no problem. Because I think it's standard for 5-minute breaks at PSI. So NCARB's a little unique.
I haven't taken a test at PSI yet, but I know a lot of people in Northwest Florida have had difficulties with the Pensacola one. And so I've actually hopped on like the ARE Facebook, and I'm seeing a lot of the similar problems like Nikki, what you just described about the PSI, the proctors not fully being trained, or maybe not just having enough experience yet with NCARB tests. So I guess I would just reiterate kind of what you said, like know like the breaks you're supposed to get and what you're allowed to do, and like be prepared to say that when you check in.
I will say, Samantha, I tested both Prometric and PSI online, and PSI online is way better than Prometric online. You don't deal with a person face to face. You just take your camera and film your room, and then somebody's watching you the whole time. So it's similar, but I appreciate it way better. I had faults with Prometric. I actually got the wrong test online. Took the wrong test, but PSI, you can't even launch your exam until your time period, 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after. And I had way better experience. So just
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, because it was a struggle with Prometric. So
yeah.
That's great. I mean, we do have less locations, but at least you can test online and it seems to be better. So that's great to know.
If I can just add just a few more things I just remembered about PSI.
Yeah,
so one of my coworkers tested for PSI in Tampa, and she mentioned a few things that I wanted to say. She did say that you have to pay for parking. So that's like a heads up, which is a little bit different at the Tampa PSI Center. She also said that when she walked in, she had her purse with like snacks and her keys. And the lady immediately said, you need to put everything in your car, and the only thing you can bring is your ID and your keys. So that's different than my experience at Sarasota PSI, because I was able to bring everything I wanted to the locker. And then I also brought it was kind of like a poncho, but like this thing to keep me warm. And I've worn it before at Prometric and it was no problem, but at PSI, they said, no, you can't wear that. So I was kind of cold during my test. So if you can bring, and if you get cold like me, bring like a long sleeve warm shirt. They also did not test with the metal detector at PSI, but they did check for sleeves and ankles. They did not check inside glasses, but there's cameras everywhere. And the other thing I would say is, because you're going inside the testing center at the same time with a bunch of other people taking the test, when everybody sits down, sometimes, like in my experience, people were confused, like, oh, is this my table? Is this the right number? Is this the right login? Because you have to log in to enter your test. So there's a lot of chatter going on. So I just sat and I waited for like 2 minutes, just waited for the chatter to calm down. And then I pressed start, because I wasn't about to take my test and there was still confusion. Mm-hmm. And at PSI Sarasota, they ask if you want headphones. I would always suggest say yes, even if you don't use it, because you never know how loud it's going to be in there. It shouldn't be loud at all, but I said yes and I ended up using it and I thought it was great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
What else? Who else has questions? There must be a million questions, guys.
I have a question. This is Talia. Maybe a weird question, but I hear everyone testing, and I haven't So, okay, so I'm a licensed interior designer. I passed my NCIDQ and all that years ago, but now I'm going for the ARE. So, but I hear everyone or a lot of you testing multiple times. How do you afford this financially? It's a lot of money. I mean, I don't know if there's some ways to do this. My company would not support multiple times of testing. So I don't know how do you all do it?
Think as an investment in your future.
I know for me, like the company I was working at didn't pay for testing either. And actually my husband was testing at the same time as me because he's an architect. So we were paying every test we took, we were paying out of pocket for 2. And that is kind of what fueled me to take, like earlier I mentioned, I took a big break in between my first 3 and my last 3. One of it was to recharge mentally, but another one was just financially too, because it is expensive and I was paying out of pocket. And that first one I failed, I was like, oh, I just flushed that money down the toilet. And then PA was another one I failed the first time before I passed it. And so that it does put a little extra pressure, but I feel like that's where breaks can really come in handy to kind of like alleviate that some. But I don't have.
Oh, go ahead and finish, Hannah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't know if I have like any other advice besides just like, if you need to take a break, then take it. Cause that's what I had to do for mental and financial reasons.
Yeah, so it is a big financial implication, but there are a lot of resources for test taking. So if your firm specifically doesn't reimburse or doesn't pay for the tests themselves, there are a lot of scholarships that you can receive. There's scholarships based on if you're a woman in architecture, if you're test taking for the first time, if you're still a student in school, maybe hold on to that for a little while and use that as a method to receive financial assistance. But there are lots of financial assistance programs to help you test take, because what NCARB is now finding that there is a large discrepancy in equity, and they're trying to address that, which they regularly communicate that. But if you are uncertain about how to handle this financially now, we can follow up in our email to you, in an email, we can follow up with some resources for you to find and potentially apply for financial assistance.
That'll be wonderful. That's really great to hear. Thank you.
I think I myself have received, 2 or so scholarships to help me test take. And I know this isn't really, easy to swallow, but I think when you're test taking with like Amber Book, don't they tell you to like take $1,000 automatically and just kind of flush it down the toilet, because that's the expected amount that you will pay in failed attempts. So it doesn't sound great, but like Samantha said, it is an investment in your future. And if it is too much of a financial hardship, then there are people and resources who can help you achieve what you want to.
Thank you very much. I would love a follow-up email.
I just have one thing, which I know worked for me personally. I know a lot of people don't like to do this, and it might be kind of like a hot topic, but there was a test that I did reschedule because I wasn't prepared to take it. And it was back when it was with Prometric, so you had to pay whatever the fee was, like $40 or something to reschedule. And things were just like so strict, like crazy, like work-wise in my life, that I hadn't had a lot of time to study. And so in that moment, I did make a decision to like reschedule and push it back a month, because I was like, I can't afford to flush like $235 down the drain. I don't recommend like relying on that for every single test. Now with PSI, it's easier because you can like reschedule pretty close to testing and it not cost money. I would say use it as a last resort, but if you are really nervous, it is a good option to reschedule if you don't if you want to save that money.
I would agree with Hannah. Use it as a last resort, because now that it's free, I feel like it's a dangerous thing. Now that it's free, it gets easier to reschedule, and you don't want to, keep on rescheduling and rescheduling and rescheduling. And you'll never know that you're 100% ready for a test. That's basically impossible. But what else can you guys think of? time management advice. I feel like that's a big one because we're all pretty tired after work. How did you guys, what was your schedule like? Did you guys wake up early in the morning and study? I know that some people study like during lunch breaks. Jocelyn.
Okay, so I will say with that I have a friend and he's a software engineer and he sent me this study. He's super geeky about things, but he sent me this study that says that you should dedicate to the things that are most important for you in the mornings because your brain retains more. And for me, that's true. So I kind of like when I study, I have like a regime, like I do things I'm very specific in the way that I do things because I have a lot of discipline for that. So I wake up at 5 and I just study from 5 till 7, so I gave 2 hours of reading and everything that I need to retain. So like the reading and things that like videos that I have to see that are very difficult for me to understand maybe, and I have to repeat once or twice. Like I said, English is my second language. So sometimes I have to do that. And then in the afternoon, I will do like practice. So it's easier for me in that way. So I would practice what I learned in the morning. That's my strategy. And I take 1 day off in the week. So if I need to study, I only study from Monday through Saturday. And I go to a gym because it's important for me to release my stress, and study stresses me out a lot. So, and you have work and you have a lot of things. So you have to find a way to relax, and, you pick and choose the things that it will do better for you, for your schedule.
For me personally, so there's 2 things I do during the week that help. Number one is because I have other coworkers that are going through the ARE, we just booked the conference room during lunches, and we all have our headphones in and we just study by ourselves. So it's just keeping each other accountable and making sure like, hey, I know you're answering that email, but like it's time to go back there and study, just so you can get 1 hour in. And if we have a question, we'll like lower our headphones and be like, hey guys, I don't understand that part. And we'll try to help each other out, but we try to keep it solo so that it doesn't go on to like work conversation and, things like that. So just keeping each other accountable has really helped. And then for me, what has worked is, so that 1 hour during lunch, and then I come home and I have my study hour and a half from like 7 to 8:30. And for me, it's about like getting in a spot that's really cozy and comfortable. So like sitting down in my living room and lighting a candle and having like a cup of water and a little snack and just like being in it hard for an hour and a half. And that's, for me, that works the best. I'll put an incense, and just so I'm like not getting up and getting distracted, I turn my phone off during that time, so I'm not on it. And that's it. So for me, like 2.5 hours a day works. And then I go ham on Sundays. I study really hard, like all day if I can, because I don't like to go anywhere on Sundays. So I'm just home doing that. So that's what works for me.
The 2 things that I found the most that worked for me is I really focused on quality over quantity. So making sure that the resources I was using were very beneficial. And then also it's really hard for me. I'm not an early riser, so I'd never studied in the mornings, but it was sometimes hard for me to study after work. So instead of setting like a strict schedule each week, I would just like set number of tasks. So I would say, these are the tasks that I need to do this week. I have to do these tasks by Sunday or whatever. And then that gave me like more flexibility if like I couldn't study on Monday or Tuesday after work. And also the weekends were my big study times. I would just take the mornings, like Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and I would study 3 or 4 hours each morning and then eat lunch. And then I had the rest of the day free. Those were my, the weekends were definitely my big study times.
Awesome. Should we go into a controversial topic? What advice do you guys have for us when it comes to the whiteboard? How do you use it? Nick.
I can start with that one.
Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
I don't like the whiteboard. I'm more of like, I like writing and everything. And when when they took it, I feel like it was kind of like a morning thing for me. I had to like prepare myself mentally to do it. And I practiced a lot in my computer. And I know your guys are going to laugh at me, but I use Paint because Paint is so bad that I'm like, it can be worse than this, you know? So I use that one. And, you know, I feel like what I do basically is just like, if there is something that I want to remember, that I feel that it's going to help me in another question, because that sometimes happens in the exam. You're going to see something and then there's going to be a question that it's going to answer that. So what I will do is I would just put like keywords. I work, you know, like I said, my brain works in a very specific way. So I will do that, and just, you know, for the formulas and everything, if like the problem is like the length of the problem takes too long, I would just put it there. But I don't like it. I just got used to it with keywords. Like I said, things that I know I'm going to forget, and, you know, it can answer another question. So I can, you know, I just flag the question and then go back to it.
That's awesome.
I hate the whiteboard as well. I think it's like the worst thing that they could have done. It's so slow. But I have found for me that instead of typing, using the text and just like typing stuff out helps. It's just like really efficient and a lot faster. And so I find myself typing things on the whiteboard more often than I do drawing them. I still have to draw things every now and then, especially when you're like looking at adjacency diagrams or something. But yeah, I find myself using the text command more on the whiteboard than anything.
Yeah, and the whiteboard is my arch nemesis. Yeah, I don't like it either. But I never delete in the whiteboard. I just press new page. It's your best friend. I personally draw everything, like I write it out, but I only use the whiteboard when absolutely necessary. I also learned, which is kind of not a whiteboard thing, but it's adjacent, it's the calculator thing. I also learned because of NCARB's new like exams, which have been so helpful. I learned how to use the memory tool on the calculator, which I didn't know how to use before. And that actually comes in handy because if you're trying to remember, especially for PA, there's a lot of calculations. If you're trying to remember a number, you could just press the M and it'll set it aside. So you don't have to like memorize it, and you can finish your equation. So if you do the NCARB practice exam, try to learn how to use that memory tool in the calculator. It's helped me, and it helped me with my last exam. But yeah.
Another thing that's not related to the whiteboard, but is the strike through and highlight features, which I think a lot of people, they're there at your disposal, but a lot of people just kind of overlook because it's not really a prominent feature. We're not sitting here talking about it, but like Jocelyn touched on, there's like keywords you'll want to remember. And sometimes you'll have a multiple choice answer that asks for 3 or 4, you know, it tells you a specific number. And if you automatically know that one of the answers is not it, the strike through feature helps you to then select the ones that only relate. So a lot of people kind of glance over that aspect of the test, but it is helpful when you come down to like the multiple choice and these sort of things.
I would say that especially the tests that have like PA has questions that are so wordy, like paragraphs of questions, that highlight tool was kind of my saving grace on that exam. I had never really used it with the first 3. And then once I took PA the first time and failed it, I was like, I couldn't believe the like length of some of the questions. And so the next time I took it, like that strike through and highlighting like really came in handy to highlight like the really important stuff in that paragraph of a question to help me like answer it just faster. So I feel like time is like, you run out of time on the test, or at least I run out of time on the test. And so trying to make it go as fast as possible, it's like, that was really helpful.
Yeah. Going back to what Brianna said, if you're a person that does a lot of process of eliminations, the strike through is your number 1 tool for the test for sure. That's very cool. Okay, what else? I will say for the whiteboard, I know I used to flag a lot of questions because I second guess myself a lot during the test, but now I use the whiteboard as my flag tool. So I don't flag anything. I just write the ones that I'm like 100% sure I want to go back to at the very end if I have time. So I just write the number of the questions. I don't know if this helps anybody, but what else? What other questions do we have? Or other
So-
things that y'all can think of?
So by flagging, you mean that, you know, it's a question that maybe you're not sure of the answer on, but you don't want to spend too much time on it. So there is an option to flag that question, proceed, and then come back to a certain point. I think there are portions of the test where it will tell you if you move forward, you will lose flagged information. So make sure you're paying attention to the prompts. But what Shadia is referring to is the option to flag an answer, proceed, because it is a time test, and then come back to that question that you might be uncertain about. Sometimes the answers later on will answer that question too. So if you're not quite sure of it, proceed, and then, you know, you might find a solution later on.
The only thing I wanted to add is in our breaks, since some of us like to take them during that time, other than like just, you know, clearing your mind and getting ready for like case studies, I like to strategize during that break time to think about how much time I have left. So if I left like an hour and 15 minutes for my case studies, I think about, okay, well, the first 30 minutes, I'm going to try to get through case study 1, then the next 30 minutes, case study 2, and then if I have time to go through the case studies. So that's what I use that for. I also take that time to think about as many questions as I can of the test, like, you know, of all the questions I got, because I do brain dump after each exam. And it's just notes that I keep to myself of like all the things that I know that I need to work on that I struggled with during the test. So that if I do fail, I can at least look at that and go, okay, there's questions about ramps. I didn't feel comfortable. I need to brush up on ramps. So brain dumpage and just kind of coordinating how much time you have left during your breaks is what I try to do. And then really the writing down of what you remember is more so after the test, but I would suggest doing that.
That's a good advice. Now that you're mentioning case studies versus the regular questions, do you all ever flip and do the case studies first? I've heard of that before. Jocelyn, tell us.
I'm the weird one. I don't take breaks. Like I said, I function in a very specific way, and I like to see all the tests first. So I always start with the case studies, just because they give you a lot of information that you might need. They might give you, you know, like information. They will give you information that you might use then. So I got very sad when, you know, people start testing at home, so you don't have the possibility to go back. Because I mean, that was like my favorite thing, because what I will do is like I will do a run through, and then I would just start like, okay, so these are the questions. Because I feel, at least for me, in my experience, if I start with the question, like question 1, 2, 3, I don't know why the questions to me, I don't understand the first questions. I think like they're too difficult. And you get into a point that you're like, oh my God, this is so easy. Like when you're in like, I don't know, the 30th question. And I'm like, why did I, you know, I don't know if it's like a strategy thing that NCARB does, or maybe it's just my brain, but I like to start at the end and then just work my way through the rest. That's just how I do it, because I feel like they will give you additional information that you might use in your other questions, but that's just me.
It might prep you with reading comprehension too. Like maybe it'll kind of like prep your brain for that. That's a good advice. We're kind of getting close to the end. Does anybody have any additional questions, or does anybody want to share an anecdote or an experience?
Oh, I wanted to mention that I saw a microphone up, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to note that if anything does happen during your testing, you should definitely reach out to NCARB, or if you have an NCARB advisor or anyone that you know, but specifically NCARB, because if there's an error with your test, or if you get a blank screen, or if anything happens in the testing center, NCARB will usually work with you on that, but they don't know that if you just proceed and take the test and you lost 15 minutes of test taking. So you really want to be your own advocate and make sure that you're reaching back out to them and let them know of anything so that they can help you or reimburse you. You know, as Talia mentioned, it is an expensive, so just make sure you're advocating for yourself. And if anything happens, reach out to them so they can resolve it.
Kind of piggybacking on top of that, one time I had to get refunded for a test because I tested on the day that a hurricane hit and the testing center was closed. And I found that emailing NCARB was so slow and it took them forever to get back to me. So I was like, I'm just gonna call them. And when I called,
Yeah.
Someone told me once, and I've never had to do this, thank goodness, but someone told me once, if something happens, you should ask the proctor to write a report. And you should try not to leave until they write a report. So like make a stink and make sure they do. Because sometimes, and well, I think all the time, NCARB asks you if there's a report. And if there's not, it's a lot harder. I've never gone through it personally, but that's what I was told. But if I would at least ask the question if they could write a report.
That's interesting. I've actually never heard of that. So that's
Me
good
either.
to know. Samantha, were you going to say something earlier?
I was gonna piggyback off your question about if people start with number one or at the end, but how I start 10 questions before the case study so I can get my brain going. Then I do the case studies, then I go back to number one. And I don't take a break. I just go 10 questions before and then work my way around. And that seems to help me because you get so tired by the end of the test, the case studies get overwhelming.
Yeah. I find myself kind of rushing through the very end and it's not good.
But aren't the case study points weighted the same? Like everything's the same, right?
Yeah.
So
It's the same.
that's something to note as well. You're reading more information, but the points are all the same.
Mhm.
I did take the case studies first, one exam, and it was a total fail for me personally, because I got so sucked up in the case study that and that's just my fault. I was spending too much time on it, and I thought I was doing good on time, and then I ended up going towards all the way to the end. I didn't take a break, and I had like 20 multiple choice questions left, and I ran out of time. So for me, it doesn't work, but I know that it's worked for other people.
I'm kind of in the same boat as Nikki, where like taking the case studies doesn't really work for me. I think I guess the last final piece of advice is like knowing how you test is really important. So if you have time, trying to like take a practice exam, like a mock practice exam, and try to set up your environment in a similar way as testing will really help you decide like how you want to approach the test. Because for me, I start from question one and I go all the way to the end, and I try not to take a break. I get distracted really easily, so breaks will kind of get me out of the flow, and it takes me a long time to like get back into the test. So for me, I have to start from question one, go all the way through, and my break is really only I take it for an emergency. That's just kind of how my brain works and what I need to do in order to like get through the test. So if you have time, like, and taking a practice test is what helped me figure out that was how I needed to test personally. So I would also put that as a advice.
Brianna.
Yeah. All right. So it doesn't seem we have any other questions, but from today's panel, you can kind of summarize that there are a number of ways that you can take these tests. There's a number of resources. please be sure to reference our chat where we've added study materials, we've added the NCARB guidelines, we've also added a link to scholarships from the Architecture Foundation. So thank you for joining us today. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to any of us shown here on the panel. It's always nice to have support when test taking. You know, like we said today, there might be a fail or two, but don't be discouraged. We'll all get through it eventually. And don't feel like you have to go at this alone. Many people have done this before you, and many people will do this after you. So be sure and reach out if you have any additional questions. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck.
Thanks.